Hey folks, this is Kalani. There are some huge changes on the horizon which you should be very excited about if you love hunting for transmog. And let's be honest, who doesn't love hunting for transmog? Clearing through old dungeons and old raids and even old world bosses to try and put together the absolutely most perfect set you can imagine. I mean, just look at how smashing I look. There is one pretty bad sore spot when it comes to farming transmog though, and that's the previous expansion's content. You just don't get as much loot when you clear through Legion content when compared to everything else right now, and there is a reason for that, but it looks like the dev team has decided to loosen up those restrictions and apply the legacy loot system to Legion content starting with the very next reset. So what does this mean for transmog farming? Well, if you want anything from Legion instances, mainly raids or dungeons, you will now have a much higher chance of actually picking it up. You can also get a whole bunch more loot to sell to vendors or disenchant, so you'll be making a bit more gold along the way as well. You can also pick up weapons that are not tied to your class's equipment restrictions, so warlocks can pick up two-handed weapons again to use for their Felguard if that's still something they care about. To show you how much of a big deal this is, here's what loot looks like if you go through Legion content right now. 0 loot for a boss kill. That's how it usually ends up. If you're lucky, you can get 1 piece of gear, but most of the time you're going to see no loot. The only way to actually guarantee a piece of loot drops is to take more players into the encounter, but then you're splitting the loot. Only one of you is guaranteed something, and you might not get what you're looking for, but you'll be locked out for that week. You can also only get items that drop for your class, so even if you take a warrior and a mage friend, they won't ever be able to give you any male gear on your hunter. It's just not ideal for transmog farming all around. Solo is the way to go, but solo just doesn't get you any loot. This is because the last expansion works off of personal loot rules. Here's what it looks like when the content has legacy loot enabled. Loot drops as it would have for a full raid of the difficulty you're running back in the day. So you should see 5 pieces of loot from every mythic Blackrock Foundry boss that you kill. You can get any item on the loot table, so you're not limited to just getting gear your spec can use, which might make it harder to get the item you're looking for in some ways, but getting 5 pieces of gear instead of 0 is definitely way better in my book. It gives you more chances to get what you want, and you can take friends who want different things without stepping on each other's toes too much, and you can also get more raw gold from vendoring everything. It works out way better, and it just really doesn't feel good to kill a boss and see no loot whatsoever. I don't really understand why any old content, even if it's from the previous expansion, wouldn't have legacy loot. Old content is old content. No one really cares how old it is. If you can stomp the bosses on your own, surely it's way past the point of being anything close to relevant content and should have the legacy loot rules enabled for it. If you want to do a bit of preparation and make a shopping list of transmog you want, or you just want to play about with sets of transmog from these sources, the big raids to look at would be the Nighthold, the Tomb of Sargeras, and Antorus the Burning Throne. All 3 of those raids have some amazing transmog options, though most of it is going to be armor sets. Remember that throughout Legion, we only had access to our artifact weapon as a weapon and weapon skins, which means the raids don't really drop weapon mogs, which can be a bit disappointing, but the armor sets more than make up for that. You can also get some special weapon skins like Tashalak and the Scythe from Antorus, so that's another reason to go back into these raids. Now, the main reason this hadn't happened until now was because Legion content wasn't considered to be significantly outdated. If anything still requires a group, which some bosses in Mythic Antorus do, then it's not given the legacy loot treatment. It seems a little bit silly though. By the time we hit max level in BfA and we got a bit of gear, we could already solo the majority of Legion's content. The only thing was Antorus the Burning Throne. That was the only one that might give you some issues. The dungeons were very easily solo, and the raids for the most part became easier and easier as we started to gear up, and all this restriction really does is limit the availability of transmog gear to the players who had been running the content when it was current. If you were farming Antorus when it was current content, you probably have everything for your class. You'll have the entire set by the end of the expansion. But if you never played at all during that time, you'd have to rely on getting very lucky with the limited number of drops that you can get right now, or just run the raids and dungeons over and over again with multiple characters until you do get lucky. I actually had a guildie pay people gold to tag along to an Antorus run last week to try and get his shaman as much gear as possible to complete the transmog set that he wanted from that raid. He took as many hunters and shamans as he could afford, and he did actually get most of what he needed in a single run. So he was incredibly lucky, but he also spent a small fortune to skip over the time required to farm it out by himself. But the change to legacy loot should make it a lot easier to acquire now, almost no matter what. But that also means that when the Shadowlands expansion comes out, BfA will probably be treated the exact same way. It's potentially going to be quite difficult to solo farm any transmog from BfA until the dev team decides we've spent enough time in the Shadowlands expansion to flip the switch for BfA content to become part of the legacy loot. I think it's a bit daft really. By the time you get to 60 in Shadowlands and start gearing up at least a little bit, you should be able to solo quite a bit of BfA's content very easily, at least if they keep scaling us up as quickly as they have been in previous expansions. I guess though it is going to be quite different going forward anyway, because BfA will become level 10 to 50 content just like the rest of the game, so maybe they won't actually have these restrictions on BfA loot at all, and the entire thing might change with the Shadowlands overhaul. With the entire game getting an overhaul, I guess there are too many unknowns to really answer that kind of question right now until we get our hands on the Shadowlands alpha and get to play around with the changes ourselves. Hopefully that will be any day now, although we keep saying that every week and it doesn't seem to happen. There have been some more builds recently though, so fingers crossed they finally open up the gates for us. Part of me really wonders why this change is being implemented right now though. I would have to guess it's because a lot more players are returning to the game and wanting to sink their teeth back into Azeroth, and if there was ever a time to increase the accessibility of certain functions, systems or areas of the game, it would be right now. Players don't want to be stressed out. We have enough of that right now in real life, and the dev team probably wants to make it as easy as possible to escape in WoW right now. That's why we saw the huge leveling boost earlier this week and why it's going to last for so long. A whole month of a huge leveling buff is crazy and kind of unheard of outside of pre-patch events. The pre-patch for Shadowlands will also change the leveling and make it a lot faster, and people seem to think it will be about the same as what we have right now with the buff active. So leveling should be pretty quick in the future no matter what. People are even saying that after the month is over for this experience bonus, and they'll just add it as baseline, so we'll always have this experience bonus, and then when Shadowlands comes around it will just stay the same as well, so leveling might be fast for the rest of this expansion. But to change the looting rules on transmog farming for Legion content at the same time makes me think maybe they just want to give players more incentives to do a few extra things in game. Collecting transmog and putting together sets can be a lot of fun and take up a lot of time, so it's great for those days where you're stuck at home and you just want the day to fly by. But it can be super demotivating when you can't get the items you want for your sets, even worse when you kill a boss and you see zero loot. This change should make it significantly easier to obtain any Legion expansion transmog, so it's going to encourage players to actually get out there and try get some loot. I would love to see the data for how many times Antorus or the Nighthold were being cleared on a weekly basis before this change and then after it. I bet the number of instances for these raids will go through the roof, and I hope this opens the dev team's eyes a bit about restricting content, especially old content, and how it can hurt and hamper fun for seemingly no reason. It's the same thing with alts, but thankfully we've made quite a bit of progress on that front as well. But anyway, this change will go live with the March 31st weekly reset, so we don't have to worry about Legion content not giving us loot for very much longer. It's literally next week. That's all the info we have on this particular change and how it will affect your transmog farming. What do you think about Legion instances being given legacy loot this late in the BfA expansion? Are there any sets you've been trying to get your hands on but just haven't been lucky enough yet? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.